Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Firestarter by Stephen King. So as usual, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, Firestarter is a really awesome Stephen King story. It's like his eighth book or like ninth book and like eighth novel or something like that. And by this time, Stephen King has basically really hit his stride. Like he knows what he's doing. His characters are really good and rich, so you already go into the story knowing what to expect. So the story centers around a father-daughter kind of fugitive team, I'll call them, Charlie and Andy. Charlie, she is 7 or 8 years old, I believe, when the story starts, and she has pyrokinesis, among other psychic abilities. She also has telepathy, telekinesis, and she can push mental commands into people's minds, which is the same ability her dad has. So these abilities come from a government entity known as the Shop. So when Charlie's dad, Andy, was young, he was in college and basically just went ahead with this experiment to make some quick cash. And him and another test subject fell in love and eventually had Charlie. So because of both of them having been experimented on, Charlie is born with multiple powers. And the government entity that did these experiments now want them back because they are seen as valuable government assets who can probably be used for epic military uses. So the story is kind of like a road trip story because it's very much Andy and Charlie trying to stay one step ahead of the Shop. It might be just a particular taste of mine, but I kind of like fugitive type stories sometimes. So after the Shop catches up with them a few times and they get away, they end up sending an assassin after them in order to basically kill them. If they can't use them, I guess they want to kill them. So they send an assassin named John Redbird after them, and it becomes more about them getting away from him and dealing with him than like he becomes the face of the Shop in the story. Even though there are other particular characters that are like working for the Shop, like main doctors and things, to me, John Redbird became like the face of the Shop. Like he was he was the face of evil, I guess. He was the antagonist, the proper antagonist. So as usual, though, Stephen King does a great job with his characters. You really feel like you know these characters, especially Charlie, because she is the main, and she is like an interesting little kid because she has matured much too soon because of her situation. So she's a lot more mature for a normal 8-year-old, and she has like all these kind of like her dad has been teaching her stuff a lot, obviously, like a lot of his opinions and stuff about government control and things like that. So she has a lot of really interesting ideas and like thoughts and stuff just based on her upbringing and stuff. So I just really like the idea of this character. I really wish there was a sequel to this book so we could see her as a full adult with these insane abilities. So apart from the characters, Stephen King does the world really well. I mean, it's very just contemporary America in the 80s. So it's like, just simple. It's similar to also the way he does his other stuff in that he gives you enough detail that you kind of feel like you're living in it, but it's not like a particular town. So he's not painstakingly going through, this town and stuff. He's just kind of like hammers in the detail of them getting around and how everything's going on with Charlie and Andy. So you kind of live in that situation. You almost feel like you're on a road trip or something like that. And as I've said before, that's one of my favorite things that King does. Like he has this ability to make you feel like you're living with the characters in a way that I've never encountered with anyone else. And it comes across really well in this story, especially like if you've seen the movie and read the book. Like they work, in my opinion, they work so well together because it's a really good adaptation, the 84 one at least. But some of the things that adaptation actually leaves out are some of the more interesting connections between the King universe. So these connections that I'm going to talk about, I don't think are spoilery, but mild spoiler warning just in case someone does feel like it's a spoiler, I guess. But in the story, we meet a doctor named Patrick Hochstatter, and Patrick Hochstatter is the name of a character in It. In It, he is a young person. He's like a preteen, and he gets killed by Pennywise. But because Stephen King's multiverse is a multiverse, and we have things like 20s, which are basically just, the same person in a different universe. They're called 20s. Stephen King has a lot of fun little words like that. But the Patrick Hochstatter in Firestarter is clearly a 20 of the Patrick Hochstatter in It. And I just kind of like that idea because it shows that he had some multiversal kind of thoughts and ideas lingering around even then. So it's one of the really cool explicit connections there. And also the shop. The shop is the same entity that is responsible for the Arrowhead project from the Mist. While that also might be on a different, like in a different Earth, on a different universe or whatever, it could also be in the same universe, but time is weird, so I don't. It's hard to tell because there's no explicit lineups, but that is the same government entity. They are named the same, and the shop is also in the Stand, who the government entity that was looking for different immunes in order to try to like copy their immunity in order to create a cure for Captain Trips. They were also the shop. So the shop is kind of a go-to name or slash go-to government entity that King uses quite a lot in his stories when he wants to make a story about, you know, big bad government kind of situation. Which is one of the things that disappointed me the most about the Institute is the fact that he had a clear opportunity to use the shop but didn't. But my own headcanon turned the people of the Institute into the shop, so I was still okay with it, I guess. So I've already talked a little bit about the connections and stuff that are in this book to other King stuff, but I want to jump into spoilers so I can talk about little specific details from the book. So spoiler warning for Firestarter by Stephen King. So Andy dies. Andy ends up getting killed by John Redbird because of a plan that he has to try to, you know, manipulate Charlie and stuff in order to get to her, because he was trying to figure out their plan in order to get to them so that he can kill Charlie. But he ends up killing Andy. And as a result of having been on the run for like 2 years or so, Charlie has gained amazing control of her abilities at this point. So after her dad dies, she basically, like, her grief turns into rage and she just completely goes like insane. She goes absolutely apeshit and just burns the shop and like kills so many people and just rakes havoc, just like messes it all up. Like, I like the 84 movie. They did a pretty decent job with the farmhouse stuff and like that whole big fire battle and stuff, but what I picture in my head from this final battle with her against the shop is just like, I really hope they do it in the remake movie because it is a huge battle situation and it's just a little tiny girl just like murking everybody. So I think it's really cool. It's one of the most fun things about this story because it's, to a degree, it's almost a superhero origin. You know, it's a really light superhero origin kind of story. And I really dig that angle. So after Andy dies and Charlie pretty much murks everybody and she gets away, she goes to the Rolling Stone in order to give an interview to expose all of this, because that was a part of the conversations they were having throughout the story. Whether, like, who can they tell this to? They need to expose this government entity in order for them to basically be checkmated. So because if they go after them after the fact, then they could, you know, they'd be liable and could be arrested and all that kind of stuff. She goes to the Rolling Stone because she thinks they're so super impartial and have nothing to do with the government. And while we don't really see what happens after she gives this interview, I like to imagine it like changes this universe completely, because the exposure of her abilities and the exposure of the shop probably has insane ramifications for the world, which is probably pure evidence that this is its own universe and it's not, you know, a sequel to The Mist or anything like that, or any weird timeline shenanigans there. So that's actually just more reason for me to really want a sequel because I really would love to see adult Charlie full powered, like go up against the True Knot from Doctor Sleep or something like that. How interesting would that be? Like have like Abra and I mean, granted they are born multiple decades apart, but like have Abra and Charlie and like even Luke or any of the kids from the Institute or something like that. Like you could just have this army of insanely powerful kids who all have versions of shining abilities. So this is just a really great story from the era of classic King, as I call it, and I really enjoyed it and I can't recommend it enough. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there and say, have you read Firestarter? If you have, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. And remember to hit that like button if you haven't, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.